I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but growing up sucks. Okay, maybe that's a little strong, but it's definitely not the same as the carefree days of being a kid. That much is for sure. Back then, fun was your first priority, and then it got relegated to something for your free time, and there's precious little of that to go around anymore anyway. But it is possible to strike a balance in your grown-up life, and that's exactly why a car like the 2022 Audi S3 exists. For more expert car reviews, don't forget to share our channel and subscribe so you can catch some of this and maybe even a little of that. Well, guys, here we are, midwinter in Canada, and I hate to be whiny, but we're starting with the in-car this morning because it is freezing cold. It's like minus 18, and the snow is coming down. There's some hail mixed in too. I know you don't really care about that. You care about the car, but anyways, just one of those days where it's impossible to do the exteriors first, so we're starting with the in-car stuff. And speaking of the in-car, this 4th gen A3 and S3, the one that I'm driving, well, it's a complete overhaul, and I gotta say, I did like the interior design from the last version, the 3rd generation of this car, but it was one of those things where it didn't really match the exterior. It was classy, it was nice, it had some cool design cues, but it just didn't go with the outside, whereas this one definitely does. It really looks the part. You can see a lot of the same shapes and lines throughout. If you take a look at these door handles, as well as these air vents on the dash and stuff, I really dig the vibe in here. Yes, it's understated, but it's still cool. And the same goes for the exterior. This really is that classic evolutionary as opposed to revolutionary design. So keen observers are going to notice the difference when they take a look at it, but really it's not that much different than the 3rd generation of this car, which still looked good. This one's a little bit bigger, a little longer, a little wider, but for the most part, the dimensions are similar, and so are the overall looks. And the platform, that's a carryover too. It's just a tweaked version of the MQB platform that underpinned the last one, as well as a bunch of other Volkswagen Group products, Volkswagen Golf R, GTI, you know the deal. And it works really well here. And then the other thing that carries over is the engine in this S3. It's a 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, but output has been bumped up, right? It makes 306 horsepower here and 295 pound-feet of torque, which is quite a bit. But then the last one made quite a bit too. I think it made 288 and 280 pound-feet of torque. But there's nothing wrong with having a little more in a vehicle like this one. Now, I don't think it's going to surprise any of you out there, but I got to say it anyways, no manual transmission, only a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic. I know, boo-hoo, no manual, but nobody was buying them, so Audi wasn't going to waste its time, money, or energy making it work here. And I got to say, this DCT, it's lightning quick, just like it's always been, shifts gears really quickly. I got to say, it holds gears a little bit too long in the comfort mode, so there's a bit of delay when you get your foot into it, but it's got these paddle shifters so you can downshift if you need just a little bit more responsiveness, if you're going to pass or merge on the highway, anything like that. And of course, this is an Audi and a performance one, so it has standard all-wheel drive. You guys know that's great, especially on a day like today. Now, no excuse, you still need winter tires, but that combination makes this thing amazing in these conditions. No concerns at all, because yeah, the all-wheel drive helps when you're accelerating, but then the winter tires, well, not only do they help make sure that you stay planted in your lane, but they also mean you can stop just as well as you could on a dry day. Now, obviously, you still need to be careful. You still need to give yourself a little extra time, but the peace of mind that you get with this combination really is on full display today. I also gotta say, despite the fact this has all-wheel drive, it's on winter tires, and I've been having a little bit of fun this week. I'm surprised at just how efficient it is. Now, this is the only car like it to have an official combined rating below 9 liters per 100 kilometers. It's officially rated for 8.8. Something like the Mercedes-AMG A35 is well into the 9s. So is the BMW M235i Gran Coupe, or whatever they call that 4-door version. That new one that just came out, that's into the 9s as well. The Cadillac's AT4V, all above 9. This one is 8.8 combined, but I've been doing way better than that. I went on my evaluation drive the other day. When I picked it up, it was snowing, not quite as bad as today, but there was still some snow, and then it started raining quite heavily, and I burned 8.1 liters per 100 kilometers. That is very impressive. I also got to say, it drives a lot like a regular A3 when you're just cruising around casually. Let's say you're commuting, you're stuck in some traffic, you're just taking your time. It's very mellow, a nice and relaxed demeanor. It's even pretty quiet. The winter tires are a little noisy, a bit too much road noise, but for the most part, it's super chill. But I like how subdued and sinister this thing is, because when you switch it into dynamic mode, it is an absolute riot to drive. I'm going to say something that might surprise you, might seem a little blasphemous, but it almost makes the RS3 obsolete as far as daily drivers are concerned. I do need to make that clear, but if you think about it, 300 horsepower, 295 pound-feet of torque, all-wheel drive, 0 to 100 kilometers an hour in a claimed 4.8 seconds. Yes, the RS3 can do it in 3.8 or something like that, but if you're driving it every day, that balance between efficiency, relaxed demeanor, and sporty performance, I really think Audi nailed it with this 4th gen. There was nothing wrong with the last one, but this one is just that much more refined. It is razor sharp in its focus. And again, even on a day like today, I can reach down, hit this drive selector, switch it into dynamic. It's just so responsive. I can't get over it. Now, obviously, in dynamic mode, throttle response is that much sharper, as well as the shift maps. So what it does is it'll hold gears a little longer, both up and down shifts, so that you can really get into that meaty part of the rev range. Now, peak torque kicks in at 2,000 RPM, and it lasts all the way to 4,750, I think. So when you have that sport mode, that dynamic mode set up, and the transmission is holding those gears, it means you've got so much torque to work with, no matter where you're at in the rev range. And again, it's a little slippery today, but it just feels so firmly planted. Yes, I obviously have traction control on. I'm not that kind of maniac, but this thing is still very snappy, but it feels really nice and planted and safe. I've got all kinds of confidence as I push it around some of these corners. The other cool thing is there's an individual mode, so you can customize the drivetrain as well as the steering, so you can firm it up a bit, and even the engine sound. So whether it's artificial or not, I don't really care, because it sounds really nice when you crank it up a little bit, or you can dial it back. So again, it's a lot more relaxed. You can mix the two. And then this one has adaptive dampers as well. And really, I think they're kind of like a newly anointed step parent in the fact that they're firm, but they're forgiving. I know that's a bit of a cheesy joke, but I think it kind of makes sense, because even in the comfort mode, there's just that little bit of rigidity to them. So it's not a super cushy ride, but it does absorb a lot of the bumps. And actually, in my individual mode, I've said this in other videos where I've reviewed cars, that you can adjust the dampers to your preference. I like to match the most performance as far as the drivetrain goes with the softest suspension setting, especially on a day like this. If you're on a closed course and you have a chance to have some fun, it's nice to be able to really use the vehicle's weight, shift it with the brakes and stuff, so you can really lean into those dampers a bit, whereas you can't do that when they're stiffened right up. So it's really nice that you have that ability to mix things up. That is very cool. But again, I have it back in comfort mode, and this thing just feels like an A3. Cruising around, it's quiet. These sports seats, they're very comfortable too. And the space in here is really well used. Not too many compact cars feel this roomy inside, whether you're talking about premium or mainstream models. As you can see with this sunroof, I have enough headroom. There's even enough room behind me so I can sit behind myself, which is very rare. Now, I just barely fit, but the point is, I am 6'3". I always remind you guys, and I can actually sit behind myself. And there feels like there's more headroom back here than you get in the Mercedes E-Class, which actually really surprised me. Now, this is where you want to be for a bunch of reasons, mostly because this is a driver's car. So, of course, I would rather be driving than a passenger, but it's very well used both front and back. The other thing is heated front seats, no heated rear seats. The weird thing, no heated steering wheel on any trim, even this top Technic. Now, I can't speculate as to whether that is one of those things that was lost due to the microchip shortage, but something tells me that's the case. But the ventilated seats, that's a bit of a shame because you can get those in something like that AMG A35 I just talked about. Anyway, it doesn't matter whether you're talking about the Comfort, Progressive, or Technic trims. Those are the three you can get in Canada. They all have heated front seats, this sunroof, as well as some other good stuff like dual zone automatic climate control and wired Android Auto and wireless Apple CarPlay, this new touchscreen. It's pretty good. It's a little slow in the response, but the graphics are super sharp, especially with CarPlay up. Now, this one I'm driving is the top trim, the Technic, so it's got built-in navigation. It doesn't look quite as nice, but then it's not as bad as that Infiniti QX80 I just reviewed. Remember my whole MapQuest joke? Yeah, this one isn't quite as bad. And the cool thing is, with this 12.3-inch digital instrument cluster, I can actually pull up a full-size map view right here in front of me. That is super cool. I'm waiting for the day that I can do the same thing with Google Maps, but in the meantime, it's very nice to be able to pull that up, especially if I'm driving somewhere I'm unfamiliar with. To have my turn-by-turn and all that stuff right here is super cool. Now, there's no head-up display in this when I'm driving, but you can add that. It's about a $1,000 option, which does lead me to the pricing because there are quite a few options that have driven the price of this one I'm driving up quite a bit. Now, it's about 57 grand before tax for the most expensive trim, which is a lot of money. But then again, it's not out of line with those competitors I just talked about. The A35, the BMW M235i. Now, the AT4V, that's quite a bit cheaper than this, but those German ones, they're all within spitting distance of this thing. But once you start to add options, it gets expensive. This one is pretty decked out. It's got adaptive cruise control, those adaptive dampers I talked about, a few other things here and there, and it's about 63 grand out the door before tax. That is a lot of money for a small car. But anyways, I do have to say with the changes for 2022, this thing is very easy to interact with and a lot easier than the Volkswagen GTI and Golf R that got all that new interface. Audi wisely skipped it for something a lot more simple. So there are a ton of physical controls. HVAC, all physical. You got your own separate little LCD panel here so you can see the temperature, fan speed, all that stuff. You don't need to rely on the infotainment screen. But then you've got controls on the steering wheel that are super easy to use, and I really do dig it. The only thing I'm not so crazy about, this cleaned up console, it's got this little nubby gear selector that you flick back and forth to switch it from drive to reverse, and then a button for park. I'm not so crazy about that setup, but it's not impossible to get used to over time either. All that stuff is what makes this such a great dual purpose car. Again, it's super easy to use, so if you're just using it to commute to work, that's fine. But then if you're looking to have a little fun, blow off some steam on the way home, or spend a weekend just bombing around some back roads, it has that duality where you can do that too. But again, it's very driver focused. It's only the price I'm hung up on because it starts around 50 grand and then there's a stop around 53 for the Progressive, the second trim in the lineup. This one is 57. Like I said earlier, it's not far off of its main competitors from Mercedes as well as BMW, but honestly, that is cold comfort for people shopping in this segment, in my opinion, because it's still a lot of cash for what is a small sports sedan. Yes, it's sporty and that's what you're paying for, but it's still a very small car. That's my only real hang up, but otherwise, this thing is so well buttoned down and an absolute blast to drive. To recap, I like the duality of the Audi S3, the optional adaptive suspension, and how well used the space inside is. I don't like how expensive it is, especially at the top of the lineup, that it's missing a few features you can get elsewhere like a heated steering wheel and ventilated front seats, and the silly little gear selector. If you can look past the lofty price tag, there is a ton to like about this new S3. It's the perfect kind of car you want to be driving if you're looking to strike a balance between the responsibilities of adulthood and a little bit of that carefree fun you used to have when you were a kid. There's so much balance and refinement here that it's almost predictable, and yet you'll still have a blast driving it when you want. And just as importantly, it's easy to tame when you don't. It's that kind of duality that makes this an ideal solution to the single car garage dilemma, assuming you're willing to pay the price of admission to get into one.